Roosevelt, Astor, Forbes, Yale, Harvard. You know these names. What you don't know is they all got rich the exact same way. Flooding China with opium, thousands of tons, millions addicted, and 400% profit. Then they spent 200 years making sure you'd never find out. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the president on Mount Rushmore, the man who saved America from the Great Depression, his family fortune came from selling drugs, hard drugs, opium, millions addicted, millions dead, and the Roosevelts got rich. They weren't alone. The Astors, the wealthiest family in America, made their money the same way. Drug money. Forbes magazine was built on opium profits. Yale's Skull and Bones funded by drug smugglers. Harvard buildings paid for with Chinese opium silver. Some of the most powerful families in American history built their empires on poison. The institutions that educate our leaders were funded by Addictio, the dynasty's Thar, and they erased the evidence, rewrote the history books, built libraries and museums with blood money. They made sure you'd never find out. Until now, because the shipping records exist, the letters survive, the account books are in archives, and what they reveal is shocking. America's aristocracy, the families we were taught to respect, made their fortunes doing exactly what we imprison people for today, except they did it to an entire country. They poisoned millions, destroyed China's economy, and got rich enough to erase it from history. It started in the early 1800s. American traders couldn't compete with the British in tea or silk, but opium, that was different. They smuggled it into China by the ton. Ships from Boston, New York, and Salem filled with Turkish opium. They bribed Chinese officials. They corrupted entire provinces, and when the Chinese government tried to stop it, the British and Americans sent warships. The Opium Wars weren't about freedom, they were about profit. The Russell family was one of the first. Samuel Russell founded Russell and Company in 1824. Their business model was simple: sell opium to China, bring back tea, silk, and porcelain to America. His cousin, William Huntington Russell, used that money to found Yale's Skull and Bones Society, a secret club that still recruits the sons of the elite today. Presidents, CIA directors, bankers, all tied to the same bloodline that got rich off Chinese suffering. The Forbes family joined in soon after. Robert Bennett Forbes, a sea captain from Boston, became one of the biggest opium smugglers in Asia. He later became a philanthropist, donating his fortune to build schools and hospitals. But where did that fortune come from? From addiction, from broken families in China, from the same poison the world now fights to erase. Then there was the Delano family. Warren Delano, too, grandfather of Franklin D. Roosevelt, made his wealth as an opium agent in Canton. He worked for Russell and Company, the same firm flooding China with drugs. He returned to America rich, invested in railroads and industry. His descendants would later shape U.S. foreign policy, generations built on the profits of misery. By the late 1800s, the trade was respectable. The opium dealers became diplomats, senators, and businessmen. They wrote the history books that never mentioned the word opium. They built churches, universities, and charities, but their foundations were soaked in the ashes of destroyed lives. Fast forward to the 20th century. The sons and grandsons of those traders now ran banks like J.P. Morgan and companies like Standard Oil. They moved from smuggling drugs to financing wars and controlling global markets. The method stayed the same: exploit the weak, profit from chaos, rewrite the narrative. During World War II, global power shifted again. The US emerged as the new empire. And just like Britain before, it needed control of oil, of trade, of mines. The CIA was born from the same elite universities the opium families funded. Its founders, Yale men, Skull and Bones members, bankers' sons, different methods, same mission. In Southeast Asia, the CIA funded anti-communist rebels with heroin profits. Air America, the agency's airline, flew cargo out of Laos and Vietnam. History called it logistics. Locals called it poison. Wars were fought, nations collapsed, and fortunes were made, all under the banner of freedom. The Vietnam War ended. The cycle didn't. New markets appeared: cocaine in Latin America, Afghanistan's poppy fields. The same hands moved the money, only the drugs changed names. It was no longer opium, it was strategy. By the 1980s, another chapter began. Wall Street exploded with power and greed. Banks laundered billions in drug money. The same institutions born from opium profits now fueled the cocaine boom. Cartels thrived because someone had to move their cash, and global finance was happy to help. Meanwhile, American cities drowned in addiction again. Crack, heroin, OxyContin, different drugs, same destruction. Politicians cried for justice, but their campaign donors built the pipelines. The pharmaceutical giants that caused the opioid crisis were backed by old money, the same old families. And when history threatened to repeat itself too clearly, it was rewritten. Schoolbooks ignored the roots, movies romanticized gangsters, news channels blamed individuals, not systems. But every line leads back to the same pattern: profit over people, power built on pain. Even today, the legacy continues. Corporations shape addiction with precision. social media, sugar, dopamine, all legal drugs. They don't need ships anymore. They have algorithms. The product is no longer opium, it's attention. The system learned to evolve. Instead of warships, they use marketing. Instead of poppy fields, they plant ideas. The goal hasn't changed: to control the mind, then the market. And we call it progress. If you trace the bloodlines, the same names appear. Russell, Forbes, Delano, their descendants sit on corporate boards. They donate to campaigns, own media networks, and write history again. The families that once smuggled opium now shape narratives. The empire never ended. It just changed its uniform. And maybe that's the real lesson. Empires don't vanish, they evolve. They shift from guns to banks, from ships to screens. They no longer conquer land. They conquer perception. We scroll through history written by the victors. We consume stories designed to keep us calm. We think we're free because the chains are invisible. But the same forces still pull the strings. The difference is, now they smile while doing it. The irony is poetic. The descendants of men who sold opium now lead anti-drug foundations. They speak about morality, about saving the world, while investing in industries that profit from dependency. The mask is new, but the face beneath hasn't changed. And maybe that's why history feels like déjà vu, because it's not just repeating, it's adapting, it's refining its methods, it's learning how to hide in plain sight. The East India Company was dissolved in 1874, but its legacy didn't die. It simply changed names. It became multinational, it became modern. The same hunger for control, the same exploitation dressed as progress, the same story retold with better marketing. And the audience, us, applauds every time, because the illusion is comforting. We like to think we're smarter now, that we wouldn't fall for the same tricks. But we still trade freedom for convenience, still sell our attention for entertainment, still let power disguise itself as service. Only now it doesn't come with soldiers. It comes with algorithms, with terms and conditions, with smiling CEOs and colorful logos. It whispers instead of shouting. Control has evolved. It no longer needs to take land. It just needs your data, your habits, your consent. And the tragedy is, most people give it freely. They think they're choosing. They think they're in control. But what if the choice itself is the illusion? What if the freedom we feel is just the newest version of the cage? Because maybe that's the danger of seeing what others don't. You stop being comfortable. You stop fitting in. You stop believing the stories that keep everyone calm. And that's when the real loneliness begins. Because once you see the strings, you can't pretend they're not there. You can't unsee the puppeteer. You can't go back to sleep. You start to notice how people trade their truth for acceptance. How they call it peace when it's really just exhaustion. You notice how society rewards comfort over clarity. How people fear silence because it makes them hear themselves. You see how easily humans mistake distraction for purpose, and how the world punishes those who wake up too soon, the ones who question the dream while everyone else is still dreaming. At first you might wish you could go back to before you noticed, before the questions started keeping you up at night, before you saw the cracks in everything. But that door is gone. Once you've seen, you can't unsee. Once you've felt, you can't unfelt. The awareness burns itself into you. It becomes part of your very seeing. You start to live between worlds, the seen and the unseen. You stop arguing to prove your point. You stop chasing to be seen. You let people think whatever they want. Because peace has become more valuable than being right. You start seeing how much pain hides behind smiles. You start realizing how much of the world runs on fear, and you don't want to feed it anymore. So you slow down, you breathe more deeply, you choose differently. You start walking away from what drains you, not out of anger, but because you finally love your peace more. You realize some people only understand chaos, so you stop trying to be understood by them. You start seeing that silence is power, and distance is clarity. You begin to protect your energy like treasure, because now you know it is. You stop performing for love. You stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You learn that not everyone deserves access to you. Peace stops being boring. It becomes sacred. And you finally understand that healing is not becoming soft. Healing is becoming sharp with boundaries. You stop chasing closure and start choosing peace. You stop looking back and start walking free. You realize letting go is not weakness, it's wisdom. The people who once hurt you lose their power. Their names stop stinging. Their memory stops burning. You stop needing them to see your worth, because you already do. The silence that once felt heavy now feels holy. You start hearing your own voice again. You start trusting your own steps, and you realize peace was never about them. It was always about you. You begin to see that forgiveness isn't weakness, it's release. You don't excuse what they did. You just refuse to let it chain you anymore. You walk lighter because you've let go. And one day, without noticing, you smile for no reason. Not because life got easier, but because you did. You became stronger than the pain. You start noticing beauty again. A tree in sunlight, a stranger's laughter, small moments that used to pass you by. Now they feel like tiny miracles. Because when you stop chasing what hurt you, you start receiving what heals you. The world didn't change, you did. And that's where all true change begins. And maybe that's the secret. Not to escape the world, but to see it clearly, to understand that pain and beauty coexist, that light and shadow are part of the same truth. And when you can hold both without fear, you finally become free. Free from illusion, free from denial, free to live, truly live. Because seeing what others don't is both a gift and a curse. It isolates you, it humbles you, but it also awakens you to reality. And once you're awake, you can never go back to sleep. That's the danger. And that's the beauty of seeing what others don't. When you finally understand the truth behind history's polished faces, you see that progress is built on pain. Empires rise on blood, and fortunes grow from suffering. That's the hidden cost of civilization. But once you see it, you can choose differently. You can stop worshipping the powerful and start questioning the story. Because awareness is rebellion, and rebellion begins in the mind. The Opium families wrote history to make themselves heroes, but behind every statue there's a shadow. Behind every library, a secret. Behind every great fortune, a great crime. And that's the truth they never wanted told. If you strip away the gold and marble, you'll find ledgers full of blood. Letters written in denial and profits counted in human misery. That's the real foundation of American power. The men who built universities and cities were the same men who destroyed nations. They called it trade, but it was conquest. They called it commerce, but it was addiction. And the victims were forgotten for centuries. The Opium families didn't just sell a drug. They sold suffering disguised as progress. They turned human lives into currency, and used that currency to buy immortality. In the form of monuments and legacies. Every marble building they erected, every library they donated, every university they endowed, was built on the ashes of forgotten souls, on the backs of addicts they created. And when history tried to speak, they silenced it with money. They buried the truth beneath philanthropy, until the world forgot who they really were. But the records remained. Historians found the letters, shipping logs signed by Delano and Russell, opium manifests bound for Canton, transactions in silver and blood, all meticulously recorded. The archives don't lie, they tell the story. The textbooks omit the story of America's first narco dynasty, built not in Colombia or Mexico, but in Boston, New York, and Connecticut. Every crate of opium was a brick in America's foundation. Every fortune built on addiction became a pillar of respectability. They bought respect with silver soaked in suffering, and they passed that respect down for generations, until no one remembered the crime. But history remembers, archives remember, China remembers, and now you remember too, because the truth, once spoken, doesn't die. The truth doesn't vanish when ignored. It waits, buried under comfort and pride, until someone digs, until someone dares to say, this was built on pain, this was built on lies. These families shaped nations with money made from poison. They built monuments to virtue on foundations of vice, and they taught their descendants to look away. But looking away doesn't erase what was done. It only delays the reckoning, because history always circles back. Every empire built on suffering eventually faces its ghosts, and America's ghosts wear fine clothes and famous names. They live in marble halls and give speeches about honor, while the graves of millions lie silent beneath foreign soil. The Opium families may have buried their past, but the truth breathes through paper, through ink, through memory. You can't whitewash blood with time. You can't turn exploitation into legacy without consequence, and the consequence is knowledge. Now you know, now you see how deep the roots go, from China's broken shores to Harvard's shining towers, from poisoned smoke to presidential power, from opium dens to Oval Offices. The same hands that sold addiction built the American dream. The same names etched in stone once profited from human ruin, and the story they buried has finally come to light. Because no dynasty escapes truth forever. No history stays clean when it's written in suffering. The Delanos, the Astors, the Forbes, the Perkins, the Russells, the Cabots, the Lows, the architects of a hidden empire. They turned misery into marble, addiction into endowments, pain into prestige, and they thought no one would ever notice. But now, the silence is broken. The truth is out, and it won't be buried again because the world deserves to know, and history demands to be heard. The Opium families built America, but they can't own the truth.